Welcome back into the WCHE studios. Headlines with Harris, along with Rich Conowell on the board. I am news director Geoff Harris, and joined on the phone we have a regular guest in Admiral Joe Sestak. Admiral, you with us?
Sure am. How are you?
I'm good. And how was your, well, first off, we had talked a few weeks ago, but how was your Thanksgiving?
Oh, it was great. As I had mentioned, we were over in Westchester going to be with my one of my 6 sisters, and everybody came there except for one of my sisters who doesn't live in PA, and wonderful time along with my 92-year-old mom. It was just wonderful.
And I know also you were in Westchester, but you know, recently, as we're going to jump right in with all the topics we have you on today for, and that's LGBT issues. And you were recently in Philadelphia. Is that right, discussing some of these issues?
I did. This week I wanted to walk in the shoes of those who are the LGBT community. I served in the military with men and women who were gay. I went to war with them. And then we came home. And how could they not have equal rights? And finally, Don't Ask, Don't Tell was removed. But we also know that there is still discrimination in employment, actually in housing. And we also know that even in public accommodations or in hate crimes, there are states like Pennsylvania that don't have laws that make sure that this discrimination won't prevail. And so that's why I wanted to walk in the shoes of the LGBT community this week.
And was that just specifically in Philadelphia, or were you able to walk in some other areas, some other suburban areas throughout Philadelphia and throughout Pennsylvania?
What I did is I actually did 2 events, and they were both down in Philadelphia as I walked between one to the other. I'd love to still do another 422-mile walk across Pennsylvania where each day in a different, sometimes I had to do them in the same county as I walked, did an issue during my walk across Pennsylvania. But now what I do is try to emphasize a certain demographic, a certain community of Pennsylvania with a walk as I did from the Philadelphia Gay News media outlet, where we talked about the issues that some of which you just brought up, but then actually literally walked over to Action AIDS, where we sat down with those who try to deal with those who have HIV and need a way to help them maneuver through, for example, the Affordable Care Act, that for the first time now ensures that the pre-existing condition of HIV, of AIDS, will not prevent them from getting health care because it's a pre-existing condition. And so that's why I sat down there to see what are the next steps that need to be done.
No, absolutely. And I mean, this is an ongoing issue. This is something that, you know, every resident, any voter, I guess you could say, is interested in learning about their candidate in, you know, a future potentially political player, you could say, in especially for their state. Are their thoughts and their viewpoints on lesbian and gay rights issues that are going on throughout the state or throughout the state? And I think that, I mean, I could agree with you absolutely. There needs to be health care, and people need to be treated with the exact same respect as other people are treated with, whether or not you're heterosexual or homosexual.
You're absolutely right. And let me just bring up another issue that I discussed when I was at the 2 places during my walk, between my walk. I wanted to talk about the homelessness among the youth that are in the LGBT community. Somewhere between 20 to 40% of all homeless youth, and there's about 1.2 million youth that are runaways that are homeless. About 20 to 40% of them are of the LGBT community, and the primary reason is because of rejection, their families and others. So that accounts for about 7 of the 10 of who become homeless. And the issue is that they're just good kids. They're rejected, or they're abused, and they run away. No means to survive. They often are into drugs. They're often then all of a sudden maybe selling themselves, trying to survive. The suicide rate for those youth is about 8 times higher than a similar cohort of those who are not gay, and so of their same age. And then their incarceration prevails as they get into drugs and other things. The cost of that is about $55,000 a year rather than $6,000 that can help them get into a safe community, a safe shelter, a safe a home. And then you can deal with the other issues that have stigmatized them because people have rejected them because of whom they are. bring it back again. For me, it's pretty simple. I lived with youth. I mean, the average age in the military on aircraft carriers of the youth is about the 5,000 sailors, 19 and a half. There were gays there. And how can you not come home and not accept them fully after they've done so much for us? And why should we treat those not in the military any different? And so that's why I wanted to highlight and walk in the shoes of them also.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I know, when in one of our first interviews, and we can date that back, I think, to August, was the first interview that we did together, and that was right at the beginning of August, and we were talking about homelessness and some of the events, and, you walk a lot. A lot of your events are walking in the shoes of different types of people throughout the state of Pennsylvania. And one of the first interviews that we did, we had talked about a homelessness count that they do here in Chester County right at the beginning of the year, or right, around of the end of December and the holidays. And the thing I want to bring up to them, because I take part in this event where you go out at midnight or 2 o'clock, and it's the type of season where, in the winter when it gets very cold, and people are outside and they're trying to seek shelter. And we go out and we try and encourage these people on the streets to go seek shelter at one of the several options that Chester County has available for them. And I want to bring up the topic of whether or not they're going to do a separate count and try and get those that are homosexual or that are gay or lesbians and things like that, and go reach out to those communities specifically to make sure that these youths and other people that you've talked about have safe shelters and warm shelters to sleep in.
It's a wonderful point you bring up, and here's why. Because when I do these walks, I learn as I sit down with Pennsylvanians. And what I learned is that there is no requirement, whether it's census data or whether it's in healthcare, to track whether someone is, or to mark whether someone, or even ask them the question if they want to reply, is of the gay community. Because then you can get better analysis, better data, so that you know how to better intervene and help people. And I bring this up because right today, as you say, you want to try to get the numbers and all, that we probably give about 1% of the $44 billion every year that goes towards homelessness and for rentals and housing and all. About 1% of that budget goes to youth as a whole. And those who are those youth that are the LGBT community, obviously, with their suicide rates being 8 times higher, are under even greater challenges of getting them safely into some place and then dealing with the stigma that has, brought them, so many of them, almost to a suicide level. And that's why it's important to try to identify who they are. Look, I can tell you this, we don't do it only because we want to help out. That's so important and the number one priority, but it's also we are better as a society to have someone who is actually out there with equal rights and able to contribute as productive citizens, not being rejected by society or by a family, that their homelessness, and then the cost to society is so much more. This is for us that we do it also in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
I couldn't agree more, Admiral Sestak. And I know this isn't the best transition, but we do have a number of topics that we were going to discuss. And one of them now transitioning into it is your op-ed in the Allentown Morning Call. And yes. I'm not too familiar with this, but talking with some people about it was very interesting. I was wondering if I could get your thoughts on it.
Absolutely. Let me tell you first, I made 2 big points in this op-ed. First, we cannot deal with ISIS just as an international terrorist organization. Oh, it is that. But it's more. It has become a state that actually controls territory the size of Belgium, a population the size of Norway, $2 trillion in assets it controls in the oil fields, that it gets $500 million of revenue by selling the oil every year. Taxes. It actually has border controls for fees and passports that are passed around by former passports. This is a state, an illegitimate one, an aspiring, dangerous one, who then is doing state-sponsored terrorism. And if we don't have the right strategy militarily to take down a state, such as we did in that tragic misadventure of Saddam Hussein, taking him down, we went after the institutions, the oil fields, the government structures that collected the revenues, which permits it to have the power to do 4 nearly simultaneous terrorist strikes in Paris, the Russian airliner in Egypt, in Beirut, and Ankara. just in a matter of days of each other. That's the kind of threat that says, don't just try to disrupt them with 50 or so special forces. You have to use our air power to take down that state. Then number two, and most important, bring together under U.S. leadership, which is always at its best, whether World War II or Bosnia or the first Gulf War, a coalition of the willing, of convenience of nations, including Russia and Iran, that also don't want ISIS to exist. And we may have to compromise on issues like Assad, that we don't want to be there, but nevertheless doesn't directly threaten us. Let them exist for a while if that helps us get Russia to join in a coordinated way, not the uncoordinated, disorganized way that's going on now to take down that threat so they own the ground of campaign and we're doing the air. Those two changes are the most needed in the near term. But there's also one more if there were a moment.
And did you speak about this same topic and these issues in your recent MSNBC interview as well, or did you focus on some other topics there?
No, I spoke of the two of them. But the third one, if there had been time, and which I'd like to bring up now, is this. What is the real end game of our strategy? I don't see anyone, particularly not in the Senate, who ever even thinks about the end game. Because, as someone once said, the test of policy is how it ends, not how it begins. Because initially we went into Iraq, the test for policy was to take down Saddam Hussein's regime. But no one thought through of how it ended in a stable Iraq. And so when we take down the caliphate, this nation, we're going to break it. But who's going to own it afterwards? In other words, if we are desirous not just of taking down ISIS, but leaving behind so we don't have to go back in another time a stable Syria and Iraq, well, then that makes a difference of saying, well, when we put our special forces to help the Kurds in Syria, and they're now going to be helped to take over the Sunni land that's in Syria that the Sunnis don't like, and then they might afterwards begin to establish a Kurdistan that Turkey doesn't like. If we haven't thought through how we are going to use our military in alliance with whom in order to ensure a stable, as best might be possible, order there afterwards, then we're not having the right strategy that could prevent us from being drawn into a longer-term quagmire, because Syria is a state where half its population has been dislocated, killed, or injured. And afterwards, just to take down ISIS doesn't mean there's going to be stability of where something else arises just as dangerous unless we have the proper end game as the overall strategic goal of the use of our military and our diplomacy with other nations. And we don't have that today.
And now looking forward, Admiral, because we are running a little short on time, as 2015 starts to wrap up and we're moving towards 2016, what can we expect, or what can the residents of Pennsylvania expect from the Sestak campaign?
To continue to walk in Pennsylvanian shoes, to earn their trust. I want them to understand, if they watch each week, that I did an event on mental health. I did one on rare disease. I did one on small businesses, that I will walk in their shoes. And when I get to Washington, D.C., I will continue to walk in their shoes and be accountable to them. And the proof of that is the videos that we put out each week. For example, the ones we did for a veteran who did not get, as a double amputee, the proper treatment from the VA, but we intervened. Those in the LGBT community we put out this week, a rabbi in the military who had to hide under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, someone who was a constituent and had a challenge of being gay, but then aligned with a leader that actually said, no, you are equal to everyone else. And my take is that I want to be held accountable for what I say I will do. But I also want to try to show people that 18,000 of my constituents walked in my district office in my years, and that's 4 times the average congressional office, because we took care of them even up to before we closed the office at 8 or 9 o'clock every night, 7 days a week. I want to serve people, and that's more than anything else is what I'd like to get out there. I serve my country. In the military, they took care of my daughter and me when she had health care with her brain cancer. This is a payback tour to serve the people of America, of Pennsylvania, that helped save my daughter.
And Admiral, of course, as always, we want to appreciate taking the time out. I know you had an interview before you hopped on with WCHE, but of course we want to wish you and your family, if we don't speak before then, a happy holiday season and a healthy one as well. And thank you so much for the time.
It's my pleasure to be able to talk with you and with Pennsylvanians, to have them listen to how I want to serve them. Happy holidays to you.